Christian parenting.
Hello and welcome to the Growing Connected podcast. My name is Amy Ulrich and I'm here with my husband Jeffrey Ulrich. Jeffrey is a child psychologist and we are parents and authors, and together we've written the book The 6 Needs of Every Child, empowering parents and kids through the science of connection.
In my work as a therapist, I see both the joy and the pain families experience in their journey together. We all feel stuck and disconnected at times. So each week we'll consider a question from a parent or a child who needs support.
Today's question is one we hear a lot from parents with kids of all ages. Let's listen together and then we'll dive in.
Hi, I have a question. I have a son who's very intelligent, creative, capable. He can do anything he sets his mind to do. And when I asked him what he wants to do when he grows up, he says he wants to be a famous YouTuber. Now, I'm in a conundrum because I want him to believe he can pursue his own profession and, walk his own path and take his own journey. I also wonder what the point of being a YouTuber is. And also, how do YouTubers contribute to society? So my question is, how do I talk to him so we can have a conversation about making good choices and fulfilling choices, I guess, things that will be fulfilling and will contribute, but at the same time, letting him know that he can make his own choices and it's not what I dictate and it's not what I tell him he has to do because it's not my life. It will be his life. So any advice would be welcome.
Yeah, we get it. I actually think there's a huge opportunity here to enter into your kid's world in a different way and to really start to think about what is underneath this desire to be a professional YouTuber. But before we get into any of that, I just want to say, we hear you.
Oh my gosh, yes, that's right. And this is really, I guess maybe every generation faces certain technological challenges, but yeah, this is big. Our kids are growing up in a world very different from the one we grew up in, pre-full technology in your pocket 24/7.
And our youngest son is currently dreaming of being a YouTuber as well, so it's personal. I've heard reports from teachers too, that when they ask kids what they want to be when they get older, so many kids want to be social media personalities. So when we see something that's so notable and so widespread, I think it's a good time to get curious. What's going on here? I did a little digging into some statistics and found research that shows that anywhere from 1 in 3 kids to 75% of kids would like to be a social media star. 75% seems a little high, but no matter how we look at it, these numbers are significant. And this is from reporting done before the pandemic, before our kids were spending even more time on screens. So I think it's a good idea to start wondering about why. Why are we seeing this? And kids are reporting that they're drawn to the idea of fame and feeling important. And here's something that we really need to pay attention to. They also feel like YouTube celebrities that they follow understand them in ways that their own families don't. So to the mom who asked us this question, I can't tell you how much I wish you were sitting here at this table with us, because I think if you were here, we'd get to find out a little bit more about what's going on. And I just know from my own experience that every relationship is a two-way street. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of the resistance that you're feeling to your son's desire to be a YouTuber may also be stemming from feelings of hurt and being unappreciated. I've certainly felt that way with my own kids. But there is a really good chance that that there are some YouTubers in your kid's life who are making him feel seen and understood and are actually playing a role of influence in his life right now and offering him understanding. So his offering to you, telling you that this is what he wants to be, is an invitation to get curious and discover more about what he's drawn to. And I have found that when our kids offer up a dream or a hope to us, even if the dream seems ridiculous and it's even disdainful, how we respond to that dream matters. And if we respond with the disdain, then what we're actually doing is putting up a wall in our relationship. And if I can't push past those really negative feelings, it's usually because I'm scared of something. So in our conversation today, we really want to talk about two things. How we respond to our kids' dreams, especially when we have fears for them, fears for our kids' futures, and how we provide healthy support for our kids' dreams, even if the dreams themselves aren't the dreams that we would have for them.
That's right. Yeah, and we have to find some way to think about it because it's not going away.
That's right.
It's not going to disappear. The first thing we always, most cases anyway, need to acknowledge is being able to name your fears. And two fears jump out at me straight away from this question. One is just that general fear of like, what is technology doing to our kids and what should I be doing to protect them from whatever those dangers are? And that general issue maybe is a question for another day for us to dive in, but that's certainly what it brings up in me, that first fear. But there's a second fear here particular to the question, which you really want to focus in on, and that is the fear of, well, the way I put it is just our children kind of wasting their time chasing either just unrealistic dreams or dreams that are not going to equip them for a future where they have to take care of themselves in an increasingly competitive, difficult world to make your way. And what is my responsibility as a parent to get them ready for that world, especially when what I see my kids' interests in does not seem like it's preparing them for that world.
That's right. I think that question of what are you scared of is so important in this. It goes beyond this I want to be a YouTuber question, and it goes back to this moment and this world that we're living in right now that I think really does call for us to examine the fears that we have for our kids, particularly the fears that are born out of a love for them. We want so desperately, all of us, for our children to be able to thrive. It doesn't matter our educational backgrounds, our economic status, anything. It is innate human desire, even if it is articulated terribly in some families, for our children to make it. And that pushes us to make them try to achieve and do more and more and more. We want them to succeed. We want them to get the medals. We want them to excel in sports so they get the scholarships. We need them to prove and show us that they can get a job, that they can get into the schools that we want. And yet we're at this moment where, due to COVID and economic concerns, some of the things that we have put so much hope in are starting to crumble around us. So what is remaining in our kids' lives, what we can see not crumbling, are these carrots of becoming personalities. And so how do we take that fear and look at this desire to make something of their lives? And I hear this mom saying she also wants her kid to contribute. This is a kid who is articulating a desire to make something of his life. In a world that is difficult for us to understand, that's increasingly hard to navigate, how do we take that and say, okay, what do we do with this? How do I put my fear aside and enter in to who you are?
Yeah, this particular situation and this mom's opportunity here to interact with her son really sits at in the need of support. This is a support question, a little bit of a delight question, but focusing on the support. And support, the need for support, why it is so important to children in their development is because support from our caregivers, especially other adults as well, is how we develop our competencies in the world. For this mom, and it sounds like she has a close relationship with her son. She's invested in what's going on with him and she sees his potential. The question is, can she invite herself into a supportive role to say, hey, look, I want to come alongside of you with this dream and vision and think about it with you. Mm-hmm. From my adult brain, who's been on the other side of being in the world, being an adult, and facing realities, harsh realities, how to make a living, how to make a go of things. Part of that support, one of the key initial pieces of support is valuing. It's like your hopes and dreams, you're allowed to have them, and they're worth a hearing. I want to hear what excites you and understand it better. One of the questions she has here is like, What do YouTubers contribute to society? That's a great question to present to her son. Like, what does he see as the contribution to society? That's a value she has. And her son can take on that value just by having the question raised.
And if you're listening and it helps, I just want to say I've had the opportunity to work with not YouTubers, but a lot of authors and influencers who are able to reach wide audiences. And not only can they contribute, it's also a lot of work. So Jeffrey, when you're talking about support and that aspect of delight, I mean, when I think about opportunity here, I think about, we might look at these people who are just posting on Instagram or whatever and think, oh, there's not a lot to that and anybody could do that and it's not valuable. And I just want to say it is a job. It is a lot of work, and it can also be very influential work. So we can get more into the idea of support, but what I would love to just push back a little bit on is to this idea that what her son is suggesting isn't something that would take work or take talent or take a lot of heart. And I'd be really fascinated to ask, how do we encourage, let's say a kid says, I want to be a YouTuber. Well, how do we encourage some of that? All right, well, let's see, what are the steps that it would take for you to do that? And that's when we start to enter into support. Instead of saying, why don't we explore this completely different career that you are not articulating to me, having any interest in, what if instead we said, all right, well, what would it take to do that? What would it take for you to start to action that dream of yours?
Yeah, what you're talking about now is the aspect of support that is structure.
Yeah.
Right. So the question here is, I could offer my support or I can offer my permission. Right? Especially when we work with our children in this manner, supportive manner, from an early age, they come to value our input, like, help this go well for me.
Yeah.
Right? We've proved ourselves as somebody who's not just sitting with a judgment about it from the sidelines, but gets on the field and says, all right, so how does this work? I may have some knowledge here, I may not, but I probably have some kinds of knowledge that are going to be valuable to making this successful for you. Or I can help you think about where to get those inputs.
Right.
And that's how you're now developing competency. You're thinking about things that, your 10, 12, 14, even 17, 18-year-old kid just may not think about. And so I think of it in terms of, I had this thought, if I'm going to come alongside and support, not just offering my permission, it's like I'm an investor. I'm going to have, if you want my skin in the game, to come behind you and encourage you in this, help it to go well for you in some way. As an investor, this is what the kind of project that I would sign on to. These are the things that I'm going to need to know are happening to be comfortable, to be supportive of this as we move forward. Many of those things your child may not have thought about, and you get to decide what's valuable to you to think about in this regard.
Right. In our book, we present the 6 needs compass. And delight is where we start off really just seeing and appreciating our kids for who we are. And then support is a natural outgrowth of delight. So I think what you're talking about, the way that I like to frame it in my head is yes and, right? So support is, so starting with yes and. All right, so you want to be a YouTuber, right? Well, really, this is about your kid's life and not your own. So then how do we think about, this is their dream. I have a very limited amount of time, if I look at the whole lifetime, to guide and equip them in ways that could actually help them down the road when maybe have figured out that professional YouTubing isn't the thing for them. What are the things that I can structure out to help them with now? What are the problem-solving capabilities that they're going to need? And again, I go back to this idea of this is an opportunity. Everything that your kid is presenting to you as a desire that they have, as long as it is within generally fine limits, is an opportunity for us as parents while they're still with us to say, okay, let's explore that together.
Right. This part of the structure is, what are my non-negotiables here? To even enter into this conversation, this is something that's going to be non-negotiable. I'm not going to support that if you're engaging in these kind of activities online, using this kind of language or whatever it may be. within your value system, that's fair game.
Right.
As part of a relationship, we do set boundaries on what feels safe for me to collaborate with. But within those non-negotiables, then it's entering into a conversation about what makes sense from different perspectives. Like, where is value? Where do you see that as being valuable? What do I see as valuable? What's the potential here? It's helping your kids to be able to think through things.
Right. And I want to share this story because I do think that it relates, is that one of our teenagers came to us last year and asked if he could start a Twitch channel. And I'm going to confess, I didn't even know what Twitch was.
Where have you been living, Amy? We all know about it.
But anyway, so our son comes to us wanting to start this Twitch channel. And several years ago, I confessed that I would have just wanted to shut that request down. But he's older now, and I've also learned how much it helps, especially with teenagers, to start with a yes and, younger kids too. And also Jeffrey and I have been reading a lot about technology and kids and realizing how much of their world is shaped by it. They are living in a completely different world than the world that the two of us grew up in. So if we give a knee-jerk reaction of no without getting curious about the world that they're actually a part of, we really risk cutting ourselves and our influence out of their lives. So instead of just saying a yes or a no, we asked to enter into a conversation. We asked him to tell us more. What would he need to get his channel going? Would he still be able to do what he wanted to do and get his schoolwork done? What were the risks that if he did this, it would take over his life? Those kinds of questions. And he had saved up, so he had the computer that he needed to do what he wanted to do, but he thought he would benefit from some subscription software that would allow him to create graphics. And I want to see him develop his graphic design skills, so I agreed to pay for that. And then we worked out some other details. And then we started to talk about things that are really important to us, especially with online spaces. One of the main things we talked about was the fact that a lot of gaming spaces right now really don't feel safe to people. Platforms can be places that feed bullying and hate speech. And so we asked him if he'd seen any of that, and how, if he created his own channel, he planned to address it. And he said that yes, he had seen it, and the conversation felt particularly timely to him because he had just heard from a friend in Louisiana who was feeling uncomfortable leaving his house because of the growing anti-Asian hate speech he was seeing. And so our son said he had seen and observed all of this, but he hadn't considered how it might relate to his own channel or how it might relate to anything he might want to build for himself online. So there's the opportunity, right? And we were able to invite him to consider how, as people of faith and people with strong convictions about loving one another and loving our neighbors as ourselves, he could do two things. He could keep in mind the world as it is so that he could move forward with anything that he wanted to do with wisdom. And that he can also be part of building the world that we dream could be, a world that we believe God wants us to be part of building together in relationship with God. And so we said yes. We said, all right, go ahead, keep all these things in mind. We want to see what you can do. He created a mission statement for his channel so that people knew what to expect if they came on to watch him play. With that, we found out later that he actually had recruited some friends to be moderators for the comments so that when he was presenting, they would be watching the comments and deleting anything particularly racist comments or the things that he was seeing come in. And he, for a while, was super excited about it. He communicated to us about his follower numbers going up. And then he told us, it's a lot of work. After, I don't know how long it was, a couple of months, it was a lot of work. He was glad he got to try it, but just wasn't for him. He didn't think that would be it. But here's the thing. He had so much fun doing the graphics that people were now paying him to make graphics for them. So that felt like a little bit of a mom win, I'm not going to lie. And we were walking later and talking about the whole thing. And he said, Mom, I'm so glad that I got to share all that with you. And it was exciting. And the thing that I think I wanted to do it so badly that I probably would have tried to have done it regardless of whether or not I talked with you about it. But because I talked with you about it, I felt like I could really share in the experience with you. And that meant a lot. And that was super telling to me, especially because of my own journey through just wanting to shut down technology to saying this yes and how can we be a part of these conversations with our kids?
Yeah, and I think it's helpful here, going to the research. We know some things about human nature. And one of those things is we do studies, and if you come into a situation with someone really moralistically, just telling them that they're a bad person if A versus B, that they tend to move in the opposite direction of what you are wanting to accomplish. But that when you introduce something, you introduce a conversation that maybe leans in your direction over the other, but gives space for you to find out for yourself how true that is, to investigate that you're more likely to come to that position if it's coming from someone you feel safe with and you trust, right? And I don't know that parents recognize the power they have to really influence their children without just telling them you can do this and you can't do that. Now, there are places where we talk about protection as one of the needs that children have, that there are time and a place to say this is a non-negotiable, like we were talking about. It just is. And I have the ability to make sure that happens. But we also have to be humble and recognize at a certain point, I can say that's not going to happen, but do I actually have the power to stop that from happening? And what do I need to really rely on? If I want to be an influence in my child's life, to move in a direction that I feel is whole, good, life-giving, in the spirit of Christ, however you want to think about it or talk about it, to act in wisdom.
That's right.
And the wisdom says if you just come in harsh and heavy every time, your kid is just going to take that underground, and then he's being influenced by other factors and not by you.
That's right.
But if you come in and say, look, here's some things I'm really not going to negotiate, and this is why, help you understand that. But outside of those non-negotiables, I really want to talk with you about it and help you think about it with some knowledge that maybe you haven't considered. Recently, we watched Social Dilemma together, and just about a week ago.
The show on Netflix.
On technology. And social media is one of those areas we'll talk about some other time where there are some reasons to be concerned about how it's influencing us. But without getting into those weeds right now, we just watched it together. We had some conversations, not really heavy or deep, but about a week later, our son just reflected back to me. He's reconsidering how he's going to manage his screen time. And I think he was able to take that on board because we weren't coming to him with that show of like, so now you need to do this. See, this is the proof that we just needed to shut this down or shut that down. But again, that's trusting in a process that you developed over years, and we'll hammer it over and over in any of these questions, is having a game plan that this is a long journey. Not any one decision today or tomorrow is going to make or break my child, but it's actually the process that we navigate these issues together that has the most influence for their future lives.
And I think about how when our oldest, who's now 17, was probably 8 or 9, and we started entering into these technology questions with him, and just being very upfront, saying, look, we are the first generation of parents in the history of humanity to have to deal with the kinds of questions that we're dealing with. And we're going to make mistakes along the way, but our biggest role is to protect you and your brain. And so we've had conversations in that vein his whole childhood. And so it's really is encouraging now. And there have been moments that have been very difficult. These are hard things for us to navigate just because, again, we as humans have never had to. But I believe that if you enter into the conversation, set appropriate boundaries, and that's going to be different depending on your family, your kids, over time, you'll see the fruit of just getting the kids to wonder about the questions themselves. And especially if it's always underlined that the value is them, that we care so much about them and their brains and their lives that really it's about wanting them to have as good a life as they possibly can, particularly given the unique challenges that they're going to be facing in this world that we talked about earlier.
And to bring it back here at the end to this particular mom and her question and her fears, I think, about what, where is this going to leave my son as a young man in the world, right? I think it not only makes sense to talk about those fears with your kid and to talk about boundaries around that. Part of my job as a parent is to prepare you to be your own independent adult in the future, to care for yourself and for others. And if pursuing this dream compromises some of your options for that, like you're not going to go to school, you're going to stop doing your homework, that's a non-negotiable for me. Because as a parent, sometimes I'll talk with our kids about part of my job is holding options open for you. Mm-hmm. You want to go after this option, and I will help you think about that, and I will cheerlead that. But I'm also going to hold you to these other options that I see within you. They may not be what you want to go chase after right now, but these are doors that may lead to your success and being able to care for yourself and others later down the road. So yeah, that's going to be part of my investor my investor package for you, is that you are staying on top of the homework. And if that stop happens, I'm going to pull my investment on the YouTuber thing. Mm-hmm. That would make sense.
And and also return to her, how do YouTubers contribute to society? Mm-hmm. I think we will be surprised. Sometimes the ways that we think that our kids could be contributing to society are just shadows of the dreams that God might have for them and how they might actually contribute and what might actually be. Could be more than we ask or imagine, but part of that is letting go of our expectations and our ideas of what it's going to have to look like for them, and just really saying, there you are, I see you have this hope, I see you have this desire, let's start here, and then maybe let yourself be surprised by what develops. We want this time together to be a place where we can consider hard things and also share moments of joy. In our book, we talk about God moments. Times when parents and kids have experienced God's love and presence carrying them through in very specific and sometimes inexplicable ways. We believe that sharing these stories together and with our kids is a great way to connect us to each other and to God, and point us all to love. Speaking of being surprised by how God can use our dreams and desires, Kelly and Randall Nichols are with us to share their God moment today. The Nichols are the founders of a nonprofit called We Are the Echo in Hampton Roads, Virginia. Echo provides support for adoptive and foster families, as well as support for biological parents who may be struggling but want to keep their kids with them and out of the foster care system.
Hi, so we are Randall and Kelly with We Are the Echo. And years before we launched a nonprofit, we actually started this by adopting our daughter. She was in China and she had Down syndrome, and neither of those were our initial plans of what we felt like we were capable of handling. But
I wouldn't even say it wasn't even an initial plan. It was a hard no for me.
Right.
It was just, special needs was very scary.
Yeah. And really, I saw her advocacy post and knew that she was our daughter. And we took about a year to go through the process, go through the steps, and bring her home. And throughout that year, we had this amazing community, right, that just circled around us and supported us. And then they kept showing up after we had been home for a while. And so 2 years later, after we brought Isla home, we got a call about a baby on the West Coast, so the opposite coast from us. She was in the NICU, and her first mom was hoping to make an adoption plan, and this baby had Down syndrome and multiple significant medical needs. And the kicker was that if we were going to say yes, we would need to be out on the West Coast in
like 5 days.
5 days from that initial request.
Yeah.
And like 3 days from when we said yes.
Yeah. And I don't like to make fast decisions. Mm-hmm. I need time to process. And this was way out of my comfort zone. At this point, Down syndrome wasn't as scary.
Right.
Special needs weren't as scary. But making big decisions like this in a short amount of time really
Right.
had to stretch me a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, the yes was easy because from the 2 years when we brought Isla home, so when we walked out of the orphanage, so we were in China, we walked out of that orphanage, and I knew literally before we walked out the doors that we would adopt again. You don't see those kind of needs and then just forget. So I knew we would adopt again, and then for Anna's adoption as well, just knowing that during Isla's adoption, he used our community and our people to make a way, right?
Yeah.
So he had given us that verse in Psalms.
Yeah, Psalm 77. It's basically says, you prepared a way for us, a way that was under the sea, and not even your footprints were visible.
Right. And so it was just that imagery of what was happening right there. The Israelites literally had, an army coming up behind them, and they were facing this ocean, this sea, and had no visible path, and yet God made a way. And so we saw that with our adoption with Isla. And so with Anna, we knew that God would make a way again.
Yeah.
And so I called Randall and said, hey, what do you think about this? And you were actually out of town on a work trip.
Yeah, I had just submitted an article for an adoption publication and was highlighting this verse in Psalms about how God would prepare a way for you, a way that you couldn't see. And I just hit submit when I got the phone call from Kelly about this child. We woke up the next morning saying, let's just walk through the process. And if the door's closed for us, then we'll know. But we're going to keep walking through until that happens. And
so,
a few days later, you were on a plane. And within 5 days, our community had rallied to help us raise nearly $25,000 for the costs of all of the fees and all of the things that we were going to be needing in such a short amount of time.
Our community just showed up, man, and raised this crazy amount of money in, like he said, less than a week. And so then a couple years later, when we started dreaming up what this nonprofit would look like, it literally was just, how can we harness community to support people in foster care and adoption?
Kelly and Randall's organization, We Are the Echo, is now working all over Southeast Virginia to support kids and families. They work with churches and organizations to train them to become communities of care. And you can find out more about what they're doing at wearetheecho.org. With 125,000 children available and waiting in the U.S. foster care system, and so many parents struggling and in need of support right now, their work and story make me think of the Frederick Buechner quote, "The place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." If you have a question to ask or a moment like this you'd like to share, please visit our website at growingconnected.com and click on the podcast link to send it in to us. We're also creating a private community page on our site, so if you'd like to join the conversation about the question we shared today and other issues parents are facing, visit the community link on growingconnected.com to join us. And now, may the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, find you and hold you today. May you be strengthened and encouraged in ways that surprise you, and may you and your family experience moments of joy. We're glad you've been here with us, and we look forward to connecting.